Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX, and today we are taking an inside look at Jo Shimoda's Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki KX250 SR. PC bikes, I mean, if you ask almost any rider growing up what 250 team they want to ride for, Mitch's team has this allure and always has. And that's because this team puts in an immense amount of effort into their bikes. Diving into the first thing, the engine. Everybody always wants to know what makes all the horsepower out of these little bikes. You're gonna hear a lot of the same common answers we have with some of the machines, just on a lot of parts being made to their spec. We know they're there, we don't know exactly who makes all of them, we do know a few. So starting out with the Pistons, they've had a long time relationship with race-winning brands, which is the Wiseco and JE brands. They run JE product personally, and there's a range here. You have the JE off-the-shelf Cowie piston, then you have a Pro Circuit customer spec piston. There's, we believe, a Team Green spec, and then finally the spec that they run in their own personal team race bikes. Of course, there's multiple reasons why you see different piston specs, depending on the head, the cam, everything else that goes into it. The valves, again, are also built to their spec. They are made by Del West. We believe that pretty much all the valve train components, your valve springs, keepers, all those items are Del West parts. Pro Circuit does sell their own version of these parts. Same thing, cam spec. Again, there's a couple different versions. They have some customer spec cams, and then they have the ones that are here in the Pro Circuit race team bikes. We believe that the supplier for these, we think, is Megacycle, but even if you were to get a hold of them, hit them up, you can't get this. You know, Mitch's team is the one that does the R&D, orders what they want, and tests through all the options to come up with the final spec that's in this bike. Moving to the bottom end, things get a little interesting. We believe that they are the only 250 team that does this. Is the entire transmission. It's not a factory part from Kawasaki. It's not KHI supplied, where you hear us talk about a lot of factory supported 250 teams getting works transmissions from the OEM. In this case, Mitch and the team go out and get their own transmission from a company called X-Track. They are very well known in Formula One. There are other options where they can get sliding kits of replacing a few gears, but again, everything in this transmission, from the way the shifting components themselves work to the gearing ratio, is all built to their specification. Pretty cool to see a team go in on that, because just that item alone, we've heard different price amounts. Also, it depends how many you're ordering, but these transmissions are probably somewhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range per transmission if it's a complete set. The clutch components are from Hinson. It is really popular to see the team, of course, just run a Pro Circuit clutch cover, as they make their own clutch cover, but what is underneath that is Hinson. They've had a long time partnership with the brand. There's no secret there in any shape or form. As far as we are aware, the team does run some sort of modified throttle body. Again, over the years, they've gone through probably multiple tests and variations, but from the entire intake side, your throttle body to the intake boot to the velocity stack, we believe they may even move the position of the second injector. All that is parts built by Pro Circuit specifically for this. The electronics on the bike, the actual ECU, this is something Kawasaki helps them out with through Kian. It is a Kian ECU, which is what is on the bike stock, but it is basically what we call a factory version. They have the full software needed to fully go inside this and modify everything, where the Cowie program tuner tool that customers can buy has a little bit of variation of what you can do. The tools and software they have allows them to basically completely start from scratch on the ECU if they want to, be able to add in, you know, launch controls, be able to add in different maps for different gear positions if they're running a gear position sensor. Of course, Pro Circuit, one of their most famous items is exhaust system. So yes, there is of course a PC exhaust system on the bike. Typically, the race team spec pipe is a little bit different than the consumer one they sell. Again, multiple reasons. They have to pass a much more stringent sound testing limit in pro racing. Not all customers need that. And then the actual spec of the can length, the core size, how the head pipe and min pipe's built, all that is specific to the engine package. So the pipe they're running on the team bike may not actually work as well on a stock or lightly modified KX250 that a consumer is running, and vice versa. The pipe they have for the consumer stuff probably doesn't work as well on their full race team package. So it may look the same, but there are definitely some differences there. The radiators are also ordered to their specifications, whether it's the thickness, the length, the core size, multiple things there to get the best cooling possible. And then the right side radiator, at least in Supercross, we've noticed features a sort of built-in oil cooler. It does have some lines out of the bottom of the tank that are fed into the backside of the case, which they've plumbed. In years past, when they go outdoors, we do see them typically run a separate oil cooler that's a little bit more efficient when the heat's up, when the temperatures are higher. But in Supercross, they still run kind of a minor version of it that's a little bit lighter. Another little neat item when you talk about weight for Supercross and outdoors, they actually run different front brake calipers. For a long time, the factory Nissan caliper they ran was magnesium. The current one is aluminum. It's a little different than the version we see on like the Hondas or the Yamahas with differentiating pistons. This one actually uses the same piston size top and bottom, but they have a Supercross version where basically the caliper isn't as wide, it's a little bit thinner. The pistons in it aren't as big and it runs thinner brake pads. They're not on the brakes that hard in Supercross, so they're able to basically run this thinner pad, all this thinner combination of parts because they don't wear through it as quickly. That brake caliper, of course, is provided to them through Kawasaki, through KHI. Another part that are the hubs. The suspension on the bike, of course, is Showa A-Kit. They've been using these components for probably coming up on 20 years now. Something else that's unique to this is most of your race teams that work with Showa get the components basically fully assembled or as a complete unit from Showa Japan that ships it to Showa USA, and they work with the technicians there. Pro Circuit has their in-house suspension staff. They also do have a Showa representative that works with the team, but all their components again are ordered, and I keep saying this, to their specs. That means the fork tube height, the tapers, the coatings they're using. They order the whole fork basically in pieces and pick out what they think they want to use, how they want stuff coated. And then they even make their own fork lug here in the US. That's not something that's provided by Showa. It's made actually in California, and they basically run a lug that is, years past sometimes it's had a different offset for the axle. We're not sure if it is different than stock at this point, but you'll notice it's a little bit wider and it runs an axle that they have made to those specs as well. Just running you guys through a quick list of what else is Pro Circuit on this bike that they make in-house or have made and branded under their name. The foot pegs, the foot peg mounts, the water pump and water impeller on this bike, the triple clamps, the bar mounts. A lot of items such as that nature are made there, along with the linkage. And we do know that the guys on the team have options of different linkages that Pro Circuit has, whether it's just running a different link arm or the full bell crank to change the ratio. They have all those options in-house. They do sell versions of it to the public, of course. So again, if you hit up Pro Circuit, there are certain things about this bike that are specific to the team that a consumer can't get. But in the same breath, there is a ton of stuff on this bike you can walk in and buy if your wallet allows and you really want the best KX250 out there, basically. It's interesting to also look at their bikes and see a lot of the brands that the team has been very loyal with for a long time, such as Maxima oil and lubricant products, Renthal bars, RK Excel, so RK for the chains, Excel where they run the A60 rims. Dunlop they've been with now for quite a long time. You don't see a lot of change in their sponsorship year to year, maybe a couple little different associate sponsors, but for the most part, the core products that are on the bike are the same. But we have heard that, for instance, for the hardware on the bike, the titanium, that they'll sometimes use up to 2 or 3 different suppliers. They'll use public suppliers. They'll have machinists they know make different bolts for them. And then talking to some of the mechanics on the team, they'll actually modify certain hardware depending on the application where it's going on the bike. You know, basically to cut down, get it to fit the best, maybe get rid of much excess material as possible to keep the weight down. Another kind of cool one on the suspension right now is the rear shock on this bike is the first modular shock design we've seen them use. In years past, they've had a custom cast shock body. A-kit shock bodies are always different, but the ones that Showa makes for the Pro Circuit team bikes are made, again, specific to their requirements, their bladder size, packaging. This one, however, is basically a 3-piece body. So your center body where the shaft and piston slides through is a billet component. The top cap that then goes over the reservoir side is a forged piece or cast. We believe it's a forging. And then the bladder is another billet component. So the 3 pieces are basically screwed together. Again, it can be a little bit more cost effective, but also by combining the parts in the right place, they're able to get strength where they need it, better heat dissipation, etc. One last other cool note kind of about the Pro Circuit team or the bikes and the way they're built. Jo Shimoda's bike here, of course, his mechanic is Matty G. Talking to Matty, Tony, a bunch of guys on that team. Pro Circuit still kind of has a little bit different work philosophy to some of the race teams out there. All the mechanics on the team are responsible for their own engines. Most of your large 250 teams have an engine department or engine guys that are in charge of servicing, building the engines. Basically, the mechanics are just taking them in and out of the chassis and handing them off. All the mechanics at Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki disassemble all their own engines, whether it's practice or race. There are a few components for them, such as the cylinder heads, which go to their crew chief to be inspected and maybe have a few parts switched out. But for the most part, they're in charge of inspecting their motors, figuring out what needs to be replaced, keeping track of all the timelines, and then they build and assemble their own engines. So these guys are going to the practice track during the week with the riders, as most of the guys on the team, the riders are typically based in SoCal. They are building their practice motors, their race motors, they're flying to the races, they're putting them in the chassis. All the guys on this team are busy, busy, busy. I think that's why you see so many mechanics that come from Mitch's team over the years are just super well respected and known as hard workers. Of course, there's a real stressful environment there, which just is the winning and what's expected of that team. So that's been our inside look at Jo Shimoda's Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki KX250 SR. If you like these types of features, make sure you give us the thumbs up, the like, the subscribe, all the good stuff. And if you like race team parts like this, check out every week on our website, we have a feature called Pit Bits. It's where we run through the best new gear, bikes, and parts for the races, because these things are always evolving, always changing. And thanks for watching.